Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on The Flash Season 7, and this is going to be my trailer breakdown for Episode 6 for this season. We're officially 1/3 of the way through, and this episode is otherwise entitled The One in the 90s. But of course, before we get into anything else, let's actually watch the trailer.
I think we just time traveled.
We are stuck.
In the 90s?
We gotta get out of here and warn the team that the Speed Force isn't safe.
You guys talk like my dad.
Come on. We need to know exactly who we're up against.
So last episode was a fairly big one in regards to pushing and developing the whole new forces thing that's going on this season, as we learned exactly what was going on with the reveal from the previous episode with that big Hulk looking woman, and we learned that's a part of the Strength Force. Cisco names her Faweza, and then we deal with Psyche, who was part of the Sage Force. So we're left with one more force to meet, and it's going to be this episode where we meet them, but we'll dive into that when we get in the actual breakdown. But of course, towards the end of the episode, which I think will lead into this episode, Barry is sort of like freaking out, has to go in that like rejuvenation chamber thing. And yeah, so that's where we leave off. But before we jump into the actual breakdown of the trailer, we will quickly read out the synopsis or the description for this episode, as it does give us a bit more context as to what's going on throughout the, episode. But of course, throughout the video, be sure to let me know your various thoughts, opinions, theories, anything like that in the comments section down below. I'm always curious to hear what you guys have to say in regards to all of that. And of course, if you're going to enjoy the video and you're looking forward to this episode, want to drop a like on it to show support for the channel and the video. Cisco and Chester travel back in time and get stuck in 1998, repeating the same day over and over again. The key to returning home is at Chester's childhood home, but he refuses to visit. Meanwhile, Iris forges a connection with the Speed Force. So just quickly, this is the first thing we need to mention. It's not in the trailer, but it is in the synopsis. And that's Iris forging a connection to the Speed Force. Now, when this synopsis originally came out, people were freaking out, losing their minds, because people thought that Iris is getting speed again based off that. They tried it, it didn't work the first time. Now, I was saying that no one should get worried about this, because if it was something that big, they wouldn't have spoiled it in the synopsis. So it obviously meant something else. And obviously based off the end of last episode, it seems that Iris will just, talk to the Speed Force, aka forging a connection. Obviously that being Nora. So we're seeing there. So just expect Iris to talk to Nora, I guess. That's what I'd expect. Also, another thing before we break down what we, can from the trailer, you may have noticed a lack of Barry in the trailer. I think the two shots of Barry actually in the trailer that we see are actually from previous episodes and not from this episode. I might be wrong, but they do look familiar. Now, of course, he went into that rejuvenation chamber healing pod area thing at the end of last episode, as I said before. And it wouldn't be too much of a shock if he is still in there when we start the episode, and then as we go through the events of this episode, he remains in there. However, it also wouldn't be a surprise either if he were to appear or, come out of that pod rejuvenated and be able to do some Flash stuff at the end of the episode or towards that final third back end of the episode around there. It does seem the majority of this episode, clearly based off of the trailer and even the synopsis, will be in the 1990s with Cisco and Chester. However, there could be some Barry in that portion as well, which we will discuss later in the video. But yeah, with the trailer, we start off the trailer with us seeing Chester and Cisco looking to be conducting some form of experiment or trial or something like that when they are suddenly hit by this big green wave or pulse of energy of sorts. It sort of looks like, or it sort of just is just like in general what we saw with Psyche last episode with his big purple wave thingy. Now, when we were discussing how exactly Chester and Cisco could get sent back in time to the 1990s when we were talking about the synopsis, I brought up that maybe they are making something and testing it, and that makes them go back. There's just an accident there. But as we can see in the trailer, it is someone or something else that's sending them back. It doesn't seem to be any of their wrongdoing, unless you count them being in that area at that time specifically, their fault. I don't know. Maybe it is their fault if you want to count that. I don't know. But you might be wondering, who's responsible for sending them back? Well, in the past two episodes, we have met Faweza, who is the holder of the Strength Force. which was the Red Lightning that we saw at the end of episode 3, and then we met Psyche, the holder of the Sage Force, which was the Blue Lightning at the end of episode 3. So we have one more new Force holder to use and meet, and that is the use of the Green Lightning from the end of episode 3, which is the Still Force. Now, in the comics, the main holder of the Still Force for the show to use would be that of Steadfast. Now, he doesn't actually have an actual identity in the comics like the other two Force holders will most likely have revealed in the show at some point. So the show will be doing something else, and the character's name that will be the holder of the Still Force is that of Dion Owens, who will be played by Christian Magby. And they actually gave a character description for this character of Dion, which was revealed after the end of this week's episode 5. A promising young high school athlete who leaves behind a sports career after gaining miraculous meta powers. But as Team Flash attempts to rein in the lad's growing influence on Central City, can they stop this force of nature before it brings life itself, literally, to a standstill? Now, in the comics, Steadfast makes Barry have flashbacks to various moments in the past, which potentially could be what is happening here in a way. So maybe Cisco and Chester here don't actually physically time travel, but their minds and thoughts and everything like that go back to a simulation of the past, if that makes sense. And that would make, I guess, tie it more with the whole thing. They're repeating the day over and over and over again in a Groundhog Day situation. I think it makes more sense that their minds would be there reliving that over and over rather than their physical selves. So when they are back in the 90s, it isn't as fragile either. They can't really affect the timeline too much. And potentially to get out, they have to do something specific. And if they don't, the timeline resets, or that specific point in time resets, which ties back to the synopsis of the episode where the key to getting home is at Chester's childhood home, might I say. I think that's a logical way to go about it, because just based off the trailer, it seems that Chester and Cisco do a lot that should affect the timeline, like heavy interaction with multiple people in multiple areas. So I think their minds just going back to a certain situation rather than the actual proper timeline makes sense. But as we can see, Chester and Cisco arrive in the year 1998 in the town of Masonville, and what says 1990s or the early 2000s like a blockbuster? Is there anyone watching who's never gone to a blockbuster who was too young? Let me know, because I'm always curious. Now, as we can see, Space Jam is in stock. That's always good. And you can even see some other movie posters that there must be new movies that have just come out on. Well, this would have been VHS at that stage, I guess. There's one for Fallen, which I know is a Denzel Washington movie. I didn't know what the other movie was. I had to look it up. It's Practical Magic with Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock. That means nothing for the episode, I'm pretty sure, but it's just good to note what they are. There might be something else there, but those are the two I could clearly see. But yeah, Cisco and Chester have to fit in. It's the 90s. It's 20 plus years in the past. The fashion has changed. They look like they're from the future. Obviously they are. So it's time for a change in fashion for Cisco and Chester to fit in. Now, I think this will be an episode for those in their late 30s and their 40s, to look back on. I'm sure there will be a good amount of references, both visually and verbally, that will be very nostalgic. But it will be interesting and funny to see both Chester and Cisco in this decade. And as we hear one of the students in Masonville High School say, they sound like his dad. So maybe there's too much sophisticated terminology going on. Maybe, I don't know. Who knows? Now we see this device here that both Cisco and Chester use throughout the trailer, which they seem to be scanning various people with throughout Masonville. Now this potentially could be the thing that they get from Chester's childhood home, or at least a piece of it. It is hard to tell, but it's a scanner of sorts, and maybe it's reading stuff related to time travel, or maybe what was on them after being sent back in time, like the material from that wave of green energy and stuff, which they assume could also be on the person who sent them back, who may have traveled back in time with them. But yeah, as you can tell by looking at it, it looks like it has been made out of scrap pieces of other technology, spare parts and stuff like that. So if Chester, he could have been making this back in the day. So maybe this is what was actually in his childhood home and they have to go and get it. Now, Cisco and Chester here are face to face with an unknown figure. Now, I would have to assume that this is maybe the holder of the Still Force. Maybe this is with that comic accurate look with the cloak and stuff. Or it could be another figure, maybe another time traveler for some reason. But I think mentally they're back here. I don't know if physically they go back, but they might. I'm not too sure. My money would be on the Still Force holder though. That's who I would say it's going to be, and maybe they tell them exactly how to get home. And maybe this is when they when they're halfway through and they're sort of confused exactly what's going on. So my money would be on that, but maybe it could be another surprise, who knows. But speaking of surprises, Masonville, when we saw set photos of this, the main talking point around this is that Masonville had been mentioned before in the show's past in season 3, and it's when Barry was talking to Savitar Barry, and they were, remembering a similar memory. And this is when Barry was younger, and he went to Masonville because his parents, him and his parents, their car broke down when they were coming back from a science fair. This is where they stopped, and this is like one of Barry's highlights of when he was a child. They stopped here, they had ice cream, everything like that. So it makes you wonder, will Cisco and Chester meet a young Barry with Henry and Nora? I think that's very, very likely, or at least young Barry with Nora. Maybe they're at some area, and maybe Henry Allen, because maybe John Wesley's ship wasn't in Vancouver in time to do this episode, but maybe it's young Barry and Nora go into a shop, and both Cisco and Chester are there. And the only reason they recognize is because of Nora. Like, they probably wouldn't know exactly what young Barry would look like at a specific point, but with Nora, they'll be like, oh crap, that's Barry's mum, that must be young Barry. So I think that could be a cool sequence if that happens, and I think it's fairly likely, because why would they base it in Masonville in the late 90s? They could have based it in any other town, but they did Masonville. So I don't know, maybe expect young Barry and Nora at least, maybe Henry, but I don't know if he's going to be in this episode just because of the quarantine stuff in Vancouver. But yeah, there's also no promo images for this episode at this point. If they come out and there's anything of interest, I will do a video focusing on them, or at least including them at the very least. So keep your eyes out for that. But thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on it to show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on this. What are you looking forward to most from this episode based off the trailer? And just leave all your thoughts, theories, opinions, all that in the comment section down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. And I will catch you guys later. Goodbye.